everybody, this is John Burra from MammothInteractive.com, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make an icon in Adobe Illustrator as well as give you a couple of exporting tips. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is set up our icon. So I'm just going to go to File, New, and it's going to come up with a new document here, and I'm just going to say Test Icon like this, and the width and the height, these points here are kind of like pixels, and remember that Adobe Illustrator is a vector program, not a pixel based program. So again, what that means is that it draws all of the lines, and everything you see in Adobe Illustrator is computer drawn, whereas in something like Photoshop they're actually just pixels, which is a little bit of a difference. Anyway, depending on what you're making an icon for, whether it be the App Store, the Android market, or whatever you want to make your icon for, the size will differ. And the best way to find out is to go and try and upload your project, and it'll say the artwork usually, and it changes all the time. So usually icons are square, and usually this 512 by 512 is a good bet for how much icons are going, or what size they're going to be. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to push OK. And by the way, I named the top here just so that when you save it at the end, it's a little bit easier. Say OK, so I'm just going to go push OK, and we have our icon here. Now, there's two things you can do. The one thing that you might want to do right off the bat is make a rounded rectangle just by selecting the rounded rectangle and selecting that here. Now, there's only one big problem with that, and that, as you can see, if I kind of zoom in here, there isn't that much of a rounded rectangle part of this, right? And that's to be expected, because this is the 512 by 512 is actually pretty big, and the rounded rectangle doesn't necessarily work the way we want it to. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to delete this here, and I'm going to just put a simple rectangle here just by clicking the rectangle and sliding it, and it snaps right into place. Now up here you can select the colors here, and I'm just going to select kind of a light blue, and this is the stroke, and you can't really see this. If I zoom in really closely, you can kind of see that there is a stroke there. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on the none here, and usually a square with a red line through it means none. Not always in computers, but a lot of times, especially in Adobe products, that means none. Okay, so now you're thinking, well, this just looks like a simple square. It's not too important here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to effects here, and what we're going to do is we are going to go to stylize here. So effects, stylize, and round corners here, and it's going to bring up this round corners here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this incredibly large, and I'm going to undo it just to show you. So you can see that there is 20 points. You can make it 40 points, right? And you can just kind of move up and down, and you can make this as rounded or as not rounded as you want. And eventually if you go to something like 150, what it will do is it will make something similar to a circle the more you go here. And the reason is that if you have something rounded, it will just end up making a circle, right? So I think the 100 was actually pretty good. Maybe a little less, like 75. And when you're making anything, it's good to test to go way beyond what you think is good, and way beyond in both sides, way too much and way too little, just to test things out. Because whenever you test things out, especially in production, sometimes you can land on something serendipitously and it will work out for you. Okay, so I think 75 works pretty good here. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to push OK. And you know what, let's just say we're going to make a small little weather app icon, and keep in mind I'm doing this very quickly, and I'm going to select, make some simple clouds, and I'm going to select the color here, and I'm always, whenever I select a white, I always select an off-white, something more like gray here, and the reason is that it pops out a little bit more. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually, making clouds is really easy. You just draw a whole bunch of these ellipses, and if you want to push shift you can make circles. It's up to you. That one's a little bit too big. And remember, if you make a mistake, you can just easily push Command or Control Z, depending on what you are on. All right, so now we have a whole bunch of clouds here. And just as another tip is, if you want to group all of these, you can just go to Control G, and they're all grouped here. So you can select it and unselect it and select this back here. Now, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to deselect everything, I'm going to hit the circle again, and I'm going to select a yellow, And this is going to be our sun here, something like that. Move that here. And then I'm also going to push control and then square bracket, and that moves everything back here, okay? And I'll just move that up here and yeah, something like that. Move that down. There we go. And so now we have like a nice little weather app here. If you really want to, you can go and you can add in more of these clouds here. Um, for example, if I just unselect this and I just kind of make a few more. And by the way, since they're all the same color, it doesn't really matter. You can go and do that if you want. And there we go. We have a nice simple weather app icon. Now, the next thing is you want to make sure that these are both centered. All right, and just select all those here. There we go, stuff like that. Okay, now the next thing that you need to do is that if you save this right now, you save it as an Adobe Illustrator file. Now, you don't want to do that. You usually have to save it to a PNG format. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push Control Alt Shift and S. And what this does is that this brings up the save for web. Okay, and I'm just going to resize this here. And there we go. So you can see that there's a save for web here. And what this save for web will do is it will save it as a PNG file. And if you're ever saving a lot of PNG files, it's best to just do this Control Alt Shift S because it will make things a lot easier. Now the next thing you can do is you can set the size here. And if you're going to take anything from this tutorial, it's this little piece of advice. In fact, I should probably even make a small tutorial just on this one piece of information. But if you want to, you can change the width and the height right here to whatever you want, right? So a lot of times when you're doing icons, you have to actually export a whole bunch of icons. You might have to export as up to 5 different icons with 5 different sizes. So let's say this is 512 by 512. I know the App Store sometimes wants 1024 by 1024, which is 512 times 2. You can see something like 115, in 256. And if you go ahead and, for example, I wanted to save it to 256, I push save, push Control Alt S again, and then I can save it to a different format. You can do that 5 or 6 times, and that will save you a ton of time when it comes to any kind of exporting. All right, so that concludes the tutorial. I hope to see you at mammothinteractive.com, where I have a ton of tutorials. I also have templates, so if you want to cut your production in half by making a game or an app, I do have a ton of source code there, so you can just go to mammothinteractive.com. I'll see you guys in the next tutorial.